And finally tonight, our Person of the Week. The business of broadcasting is changing. ABC, CBS, and NBC, still the powers of the industry, now rule less of the roost because of competition from local stations and cable outlets and soft advertising revenues. Our Person of the Week runs one of those networks. This week, his company and his news division in particular are very much in the news themselves. He, however, has shied away from the lights of his new business, and he hasn't spoken before cameras since he took the top job at CBS last September.
I think we have a lot of hard work ahead of us.
Hard work. It's as American as apple pie. The news was cheered at CBS corporate headquarters, known as Black Rock, as Lawrence Tish took over last September as acting chief executive officer. He's a self-made billionaire out of Flatbush, Brooklyn, who's closeted himself most of his life with telephones and stock tickers, almost intuitively turning profits from corporations which seem stale or washed up. He bought, for example, CNA Financial in 1974 for $200 million. Today it's worth $3 billion.
So he's been very successful as a strategist, as a planner, as someone who anticipated long-term trends. In CBS, he is entering a business that people when he entered the insurance business, said was, floundering and was on its weaker days. And in fact, CBS has suffered a real decline in income.
He moved in with the well-defined Tish touch, a lean, mean approach. 400 jobs were cut. 700 more were vacated by attrition. And Tish explained, that's the way it is in any business. You don't cut muscle, you cut fat. No one argued there wasn't plenty of fat to be trimmed. With new corporate management at ABC and NBC tightening the belt, the early moves by Tish weren't considered that unusual. But then he applied standard business austerity policies to the public trust of network news, after earlier promising it wouldn't be touched.
Everybody in the news division is a friend of mine. I think they're wonderful people, and I think they have a great tradition, and they will continue with that tradition.
Last week, Tish abruptly cut the CBS News budget by $30 million and fired 200 employees. That jolt was compounded when Tish seemed to try to duck the responsibility, saying, I never said to Howard Stringer, president of CBS News, we have to cut the budget at the news division. After Stringer asked for a meeting, Tish clarified his position. Tish had personally toured the worldwide news bureaus and talked with the frontline people before deciding CBS News could be streamlined without sacrificing quality. There are plenty of experts who might buy that opinion, but few who would endorse the Tish manner of carrying it out.
CBS has obviously gone about it in the most high-profile, highly visible, maybe dumbest way. And ABC is probably going to come out the same way at the same point with fewer people, fewer crews, fewer bureaus. But I think that probably we're going to do it in a less high-profile way.
The CBS News firings put Tish squarely at the center of a firestorm, with much of the heat coming from his own shop. Combative CBS News anchorman Dan Rather sent a message to Tish in a quick New York Times piece saying, we are determined that our new corporate management not lead us into a tragic transformation from Edward R. Murrow to mediocrity. I have no intention of participating in the demise of CBS News. Veteran CBS News staffers were shocked and angered to see the hit list. 90 producers and 14 on-air correspondents, including veteran Ike Pappas.
What we have here is now in the 80s an internal threat to CBS News coverage, and his name is Larry Tish, and his bean counters, and the accountants who are going to have an impact on how CBS News and probably the whole television news industry does its job.
Lawrence Tish has traditionally stayed out of the manager's seat and the limelight.
The main job now is to bring the company back to the standards and heights that Mr. Paley set for this company over his many years in charge of the company.
Thus, as our Person of the Week, we choose acting CBS President Lawrence Tish, a businessman with a keen eye for the bottom line. But in cutting the budget at CBS News, has he infringed on a public trust? Has he struck a sensitive nerve beyond the egos and careers directly involved? Members of a congressional committee, for example, gathered outside CBS News in Washington recently and called for congressional hearings on the possibility of licensing the networks. Well, however things turn out, recent events have made this certainly the Tish era at Black Rock.